Book talk isn't political. Keep politics outside of book talk. Books aren't for political. She was poor and had to kill to provide for her family. She was a slave and then turned into an assassin. Those are politics. I know a lot of people are making these type of videos, but a lot of the books that they're using as example are like The Poppy War or Blood of a Right Haven or like adult fantasy books. And let's be real here. The people who are saying that books aren't political are people who are reading Sarah J Maas and Fourth Wing and other romanticises because they think that they can turn their brain off to read. These are not people who read queer books or black books or read diversely, period. They are people who only read smut because they want to get their rocks off. Let's be honest and let's be real. So I'm going to speak in a language that you will understand. There is no book out here that is not political no matter what you're reading. Okay, that stems from your little small town romances because a lot of small town romances have propaganda in them anyways, all the way to your mafia romances. Okay, it doesn't just stop at romantasy, it's also fantasy. Everything is political. The fact that you are a woman reading is political.
Something that I rarely talk about on this app is my experience with Israelis in Israel. And it's mainly because of how jarringly similar I found Israelis to be to Americans, except I found that Israelis are just like the next iteration of Americans. And this is a very tough pill to swallow as an American myself. But this was truly proven to me last week when Donald Trump was elected and I saw so many Democrats and liberals spew the most genocidal verbiage on this app freely. And although I was not shocked nor surprised, I was mortified. It is the same type of genocidal verbiage that I hear from Israelis, especially when I was in Israel. I think it's really important to understand that both of these countries have one thing in common, and it's that they are built on a lie. Okay, so the lie that Israel was built on is that 2,000 years ago, God gave this land to Jewish people, and so every Jewish person in the world has right over Palestine. The lie in which America was built on is also America's number one exporter, which is the American dream. And this is also a lie. It is the lie that we have the right to the pursuit of happiness, freedom, etc. And these lies are built to veil and mask that these two countries are actually colonial empires. And because Americans and Israelis cannot see that these countries, their governments, are colonial empires, they do not care about people across the world who are hurting because of their government. They feel completely disconnected, and they don't see that the problems of the people who their country is inflicting harm on has anything to do with anything that's happening here domestically. I saw the brilliant Noura Erakat speak the other day, and she said something really important that I've been thinking about. She said that Palestine is part of U.S. geography because this is a U.S. genocide, a U.S.-led genocide in Palestine. This is a U.S.-Israel occupation of Palestine. Without the U.S., Israel would not be able to occupy Palestine. It would not be able to commit a genocide on Palestine because they benefit from U.S. Taxpayer dollars, which they get billions of each year. They benefit off of U.S. weapons. The fighter jets that bomb and kill Palestinians in Gaza are made in the U.S. So without the U.S., Israel would not be able to occupy nor commit genocide on Palestinians. So Palestinians are a U.S. problem. It is a domestic problem. In the same way that U.S. has control over Puerto Rico. It is in the same way that Puerto Rico is part of the U.S. geography. In the fact that Puerto Ricans do not have the right to self-determination, nor do they have the right to participate in U.S. elections. It is in the same way that Hawaii is part of U.S. geography, even though this was a sovereign nation before it was illegally annexed. It is in the same way that Guantanamo Bay is part of U.S. geography. Even though, and I don't know if you know this, but each year America sends a check to Cuba for Guantanamo Bay, which Cuba refuses to cash because they see Guantanamo Bay as an illegal occupation of the U.S., which now the U.S. commits nefarious acts of torture on citizens of the world on that land. And for decades, Cuba has refused to cash in any of the checks that the US has given them for Guantanamo Bay. I want you to understand this because I think that Americans see what's happening in Palestine as that's what's happening to those people over there. No, Palestinians are part of US domestic issues. And I don't think that that is registering to Americans because they don't see Palestinians as citizens, so they're not a problem here, but they are in fact a problem. It is your tax dollars that is killing them. Palestinian tax dollars are not killing Americans. They are completely your problem. This has to be confronted. We must confront the issue that Palestinians are a US problem. And the last thing I want to say is that if you are horrified by the fact that so many liberals and Democrats are on this app just saying the most genocidal shit and running to Starbucks and looking an absolute fool, I want you to understand that these people were always going to be a liability to the pro-Palestinian movement. It is really important to understand that. People who, one, did not really understand the history of Palestine or the history of Palestinian resistance, people who did not really understand what the Palestinian resistance was, people who really don't know what it is to actually build community because they think that social media activism is real activism. They were always going to be a liability to the movement. And so it is a blessing in disguise that these people shown themselves, and the people who are focused on the task will continue to move forward. The people that I spent a year building community with are not out here acting an absolute fool. They're not running to Starbucks. They're not, screaming, I hope Gaza gets turned into a parking lot. They're not looking to who to point fingers at. They're not doing any of that. And I think that what makes a really good community is a community that shares certain values, but they're not trying to impose their ways of life onto each other. So I am in community with people who are part of the LGBT community, but they're not trying to impose their belief systems onto me. They're not trying to convince me that maybe I should explore my sexuality and why I should have a pronoun. They're not doing that. And I'm in community with Muslim women who wear a hijab, and they're not trying to impose on me why I should wear a hijab. They're not imposing on me why I should follow Islam. And I'm in community with Black Americans who also, some have voted for Kamala, but they weren't trying to impose on me that I should vote for Kamala because they understand very well that even they wouldn't want to vote for a person that is committing genocide on their own people. And I think that when you have a group of people that respect each other and say, hey, our mutual and common belief is that we respect life and we respect freedoms, we're not trying to impose that shit onto each other. And so over my dead body, are we going to allow this government to kill a whole bunch of people on live stream? That is what makes a strong community. And if you were building community with people who are running to Starbucks, you need to reevaluate what it is that community means to you.
I used to read long books, but y'all, 500, 600 pages, y'all are doing a lot. You're doing a lot, because why is it that long?
Let's invade somebody else's bookshelf, shall we? On today's episode, we're doing my sister. Because one, she likes to steal from me, so we're doing like an archival, we're doing inventory. Two, we have some crossover book taste, but we also have some differences. So this should be fun. Speaking of stealing, 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I've read this. I love it. It's one of my favorite romance books. This is mine. Good taste, girl. Good taste. Next up, we have Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. I also gave this to her. This one I gave to her. This one she stole, but this was a gift. It's a cute, quick read. Next up, we have Romeo and Juliet. I have not read this since high school. When I was in high school, I was cosplaying Understanding Shakespeare. I didn't have a clue. I also just saw Romeo and Juliet on Broadway with Rachel Zegler and Kit Connor. So that inspired me to engage with the text again. Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is also... this book is good. I have no words. You may actually not be okay in the head if you read it like in the times we're living in right now. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I've only read Beloved by Toni Morrison, and I've been told that The Bluest Eye is a good way to get introduced to her work again. If that's a lie, definitely let me know. But you can never go wrong with Toni Morrison. She also has a few other Toni Morrison books on her shelf, but I already had too many books in my stack. So just know, Toni, I'm coming for you. Am I a fake dystopian reader if I haven't read 1984 by George Orwell? I think the answer is yes. I must have missed this part in the curriculum when I was in school. I have not read this. Or if I read it, I don't remember, but I'm interested. That may be another one where like why would I want to read about surveillance in a time like this? You know what I mean? Romance author that she has 2 books of on her shelf is Jasmine Guillory. She has Party of Two and The Wedding Party. I'm pretty sure I requested this on Libby and just like never got it. So maybe I'll rob her. Maybe I'll rob my girl. Maybe I'll rob my sister. I definitely heard more about Party of Two than The Wedding Party. I'm gonna steal one. Payback. We have my king, John Green. He is literally one of my favorite authors of all time. One of my favorite books by him is The Anthropocene Reviewed. She's not present right now, but I'll put her right here so you know. Read this book if you haven't already. It's a collection of essays, so it's a little different than what you may be used to with John Green. Who hasn't read Paper Towns and The Fault in Our Stars? These are classics. In my book. I don't know how John Green is able to like get into the mind of a teenage girl in the way that he does. Very interesting. The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. About a year, maybe 2 years ago, I watched the new adaptation of this. They made a TV show out of it starring Theo James. It's very rare that I go back to a book after already seeing the screen adaptation. It usually has to be the book first and then the screen adaptation. Maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe I'll change my habits. Minor Detail by Adania Shibli. This book engages with the horrors of Palestinian disposition. It jumps between 1949, which is the summer after the first Nakba, and I believe the early 2000s, where a young woman is trying to get more details on a crime that was committed during that past time. See her experience moving through a world where she's treated as a second-class citizen while she's trying to get more details on this historical crime. I read this book a year ago. It's gut-wrenching, but it does give you really good insight into the experience of Palestinians. Lastly, we have some favorites of mine. Book Lovers by Emily Henry, and then Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. My sister bought both of these books when we were in the UK together last winter. I kind of want to steal this version of Book Lovers because I have the US version and I'm jealous of her. Girl, don't be shocked when you come home and it's gone. R.F. Kuang, one of my favorite authors. I'm currently reading The Poppy War right now. Let's truly see what books I leave this house with. Because it's payback time, baby. It's payback time.
The children can't read. The children can't read. My loves, the children can't speak. The children are refusing to engage any thought more ideologically complex than yes or no. At an intro philosophy class for college freshmen, a class was asked, why is killing innocent people bad? The silence? Deafening. The single most terrifying sound I've ever heard in my entire life. Minutes elapse. No response. To the extent that I'm already at the point where I'll accept because killing people is bad? And then finally, the professor calls out a student and demands an answer. And the student looks at him and says, I don't know. Like if I asked them something I was asked during Epistemology 101. Does this chair stop being a chair when you look away from it because your perception is your reality? Oh my god. But no, they stared ahead blankly like the professor and the aides were the morons for even asking. And every single question asked was like this. On a slightly more serious note, although I am joking about it, I do find it concerning. Because for years the bare minimum success to me was, well, at least I can get them talking. But now even that seems a challenge. There were many surprises during the 2024 election cycle. Many things I didn't expect. But of all the things I didn't expect, having an obsessive-compulsive ritual I've spent at least a decade and $1,000 attempting to remove vanish overnight was up there. Many of my followers have correctly ascertained this, but I have obsessive-compulsive disorder, and the specific subset I struggle most heavily with is called magical thinking obsessive-compulsive disorder. What does this mean? It means that every bad thing that has ever happened to you is my fault for failing to do the proper world-ending prevention procedures. The ritual that I am best known for is that I obsessively flip coins to predict the future, heads being yes, tails being no. And logically, I know that a coin toss is 50-50, and that it could go either way, but I've been using this to quell my anxiety for about a decade and can't stop. However, the problem with the coin toss being 50-50 is that it also reinforces your anxiety just as often as it dispels it. And although I logically know both of those things, the answer is yes. I have used the coin toss to make major life decisions I'm still paying the consequences for. And guys, the coins told me Kamala Harris would be president, no joke, like 20 times. And I have not felt the urge to perform that ritual since election day. This is one I used to perform, no joke, like 20 times a day. I'm cured. Kind of. Which is good, because I'm gonna need as many of my faculties as I can get to survive the next 4 years.
The Star's 500th episode, let's talk about it, because this has been by far my favorite episode of the season. And I'm gonna tell you why right now. It's because the theme was Latin and ballroom dance. It wasn't a theme, it was Latin and ballroom dance. I was a little bit wary when I first heard that they were going to be kind of recreating previous dances because I had the assumption that they were going to be assigned them. Seeing that the stars had input and some agency as to which ones they were doing made me feel a lot better, and I think it really worked to everybody's advantage. Okay, so I'm going to rapid fire through all of the tribute dances and then again through the instant dances, but I do want to talk about the instant dances for a second in case you don't get that far. I loved the instant dances. I want to see more of that. It brought me so much joy as a social dancer, as a person who does do partner dancing without choreography at any given time. Seeing a completely different group of people, both like the stars themselves, who are obviously new to dance generally, but also even like the pros who are generally, at least within Dancing with the Stars, are doing like choreographed dances. They're not really doing any type of improv. Seeing them do their instant dances brought me so much joy, and I think it was a great confidence builder for every single one of them. The fact that they came out, half of them got the dances that they were dreading and then did way better than they were expecting. That is going to make all of them such better dancers because, like Jenna said, you came out here and you did that and you did it first. Okay, anyways, tribute dances. Joey and Jenna's contemporary, it was a beautiful dance. I do agree with Carrie Ann in the sense that like it was missing something, but it's not because the dance was missing something. It's because Allison and Riker's contemporary that they were basing it off of had a very specific emotional like pinpoint that it was addressing, and the emotional like story that Jenna and Joey were telling was just very different, and so it's hard to like compare the two when the storytelling is different, and storytelling is so much like the meat and bones of contemporary. Okay, Danny and Whitney's quick step. It was all right. It was okay. I loved Whitney's choreography and the changes that she made to it. I agree with the judges. He was a little off time. It was still an overall pretty good dance, but like it was a pretty good dance for a couple of weeks ago. I do feel like Danny has really plateaued, and I'm kind of ready to see him go. Dwight and Daniela, they did James and Sharna's Argentine Tango, which if you guys know, James and Sharna is like one of my favorite couples that has ever been on the show. I love this dance. I was mildly, I'm going to say it, disappointed to see that Dwight got it because I wasn't, like, I wanted to see them do justice to it. Forget about Dwight. I don't care about Dwight. Daniela, Daniela, you did it justice, girl. What Derek was saying about, like, girl, you were dancing. That's what I was saying to the screen while I was watching as well. She put everything into that. I wasn't even watching Dwight, to be honest. I really did not care. No offense, Dwight. He was delightful to watch the first couple of episodes. Surprisingly agreeing with Carrie Ann quite a bit last night. I feel like the first two episodes he did really well, and then it just kind of fell off. It just kind of fell off from there. And yeah, I think it was the right time for him to go home. He's been delightful. But way to go out with a bang. Daniela, you really did that. But oh my God, Steven and Riley. Remember like 3 weeks ago when I said that I really wanted to see Steven be given the opportunity to do some of the more lyrical and slower moving dances? I feel like most of what we've seen from him so far requires very sharp movements and very like specific timing, which as we know, he struggles with timing. Seeing his contemporary, I was like, that's playing to his strengths. I want to see him do a Viennese waltz. I want to see him do a rumba because I feel like he would come out of left field and really do well on those. And then the other thing that I've been saying about Steven for weeks is that I have been frustrated with him and Riley. I love them as a pair, okay? I think Riley is great, but my frustration has just been the fact that Steven has so much potential and Riley doesn't have the experience in teaching to be able to tap into that potential fully. Getting Mark in the studio unlocked a whole new Steven. There was so much progress made. It was incredible. I hope this trajectory continues because honestly, he can make it to the final easy at this point. Chandler and Brandon, what do I even need to say? I feel like I don't need to say anything. Yeah, they got 2 perfect scores yesterday. Yeah, obviously, they deserve them. Alona and Alan's quick step was so fun. I feel like that, I just feel like Alona has gotten so much more comfortable on the dance floor, and this dance really played into her strengths, like the joy and the delight that she has in dancing with Alan. It was adorable. It was so fun-filled. I loved Lindsay and Jordan's season. I was so glad they were winners. I think they did a great job. I loved them going behind the judges. That was so much fun. But okay, back to the instant dances. I think overall they did a really good job. All of them. Even the ones that weren't as strong, I still think that, like, if you had told them week 1 that they would be doing this and just like a few weeks later, they would have been freaking out. And even though they were also freaking out having to do it last night, they did so well. And again, I just think that this is actually such a good confidence booster for them as dancers. And again, it's just like forcing them to prove to themselves that they can do it, that they can do it on the spot, that they can trust in the skills that they have built and the partnership that they have built in order to create something pretty good, even on the fly. That confidence will take them so far, and I honestly hope that they continue to do this as like a fun little thing towards the end of the seasons in the future. I think it's actually a very useful skill building exercise. Anyways, I loved last night. I really did. Again, the theme, Latin and ballroom. Let's do more of that, because all of the dances that were selected were such wonderful, iconic, content-heavy dances, which is what I want to see. Again, I am the classic Len Goodman viewer. I don't want all of this messing about. And I feel like last night there really wasn't any messing about.
I have to say, one of the craziest parts of this post-election week, discussion-wise, has been hearing all these young men trying to justify their voting for Donald Trump by giving what is essentially the Charlotte from Pride and Prejudice speech. I'm serious. Like, someone will tweet, like, we need to discuss how all these young men got radicalized down the alt-right pipeline. And all of the replies are these young dudes like, I'm 27 years old. I have no money and no prospects. And I'm already a burden to my family. And I'm frightened. So don't judge me, bitch. Don't you dare judge me, bitch. And it's like, what? I wouldn't judge you if you were just marrying a ridiculous man, but that excuse doesn't work for fascism. It doesn't excuse turning into a fascist. Charlotte didn't turn into a fascist. As much as I would love to queen out right now, I just need a night to queen in. I need a night on my lonesome to reflect on my queendom, to reflect on my crown. And I hope none of my queens take any offense. I hope my queens will understand.
I'm using this as a jumping off point because I think as Hunger Games fans, when we discuss the series, we kind of give the Capitol way too much credit because we are led to believe on purpose that these societies, like these governments, are so in control. And they are puppeteering and masterfully planning out every single thing. And they are in control of absolutely everything. And they are watching you, and you have no power. And that's intentional, right? So that people in the districts feel that way, so that they are like, I can't uprise, I can't push back because they are entirely in control. There's no way I can weasel my way up to change things. This isn't necessarily the truth, right? Work smarter, not harder. I really think this is something that happens in the Capitol, because the people we meet in the Capitol, let's talk about Seneca Crane. I think a lot of people think he's an outlier amongst the Capitol people, amongst game makers in particular. But in fact, it's Plutarch and President Snow who are the outliers. These are the people who know why the games are the way that they are. They know why the games are happening. Obviously, everyone's told the games that are punishment for the dark days, but they are more than that, and you can see that in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And so as we dip our toes into Haymitch's time and Katniss's time, we can see that the game makers, the people who are often in control, don't necessarily play into the narrative that the districts are led to believe. They're not these brilliant minds controlling and manipulating every single detail of your lives. There are systematic things in place to control those things. And so when we look at the games, right, most of those game makers are like Seneca Crane. They don't fully understand the games the way that Snow wants people to. And we can look at Annie's games, right? There's an earthquake. The question is the earthquake game maker made, or is it, naturally occurring? If it's naturally occurring, the people in the districts are likely not told about that. They don't know that. Maybe they're led to believe that it is game maker made because, again, playing into that part of control. The game makers are in control. The Capitol is totally in control. Nature can be controlled. Because what is being a game maker but playing God? or if it is game maker made actually, and it leads to an anticlimactic ending where everyone just drowns and Annie is the only one who survives. That happens. That happens sometimes in Katniss's time, right? That's the 70th games. Katniss remembers another time where they just freeze to death. That's decades into the games. So who's to say that it's implausible and it hasn't happened many times before? Not every year in the games is going to be necessarily successful and hit the nail on the head, or be necessarily entertaining for the Capitol. Because the game makers, the people in the Capitol, are not as smart and not as in control as we like to think.
Infighting isn't the problem. Your aversion to conflict is. Your inability to communicate with somebody you disagree with is. Notice how people only label things as infighting when it is something that does not affect them, or it is something that they are being called out for. Calling out problematic rhetoric, problematic behaviors, or problematic beliefs within your own technical political affiliation is incredibly important and should not be discouraged in any way. It's also inherently telling about how a lot of you view the world, that you believe if somebody falls on the same side of the political spectrum as you, they must believe everything you believe or shut up and fall in line. And just so you're aware, MAGA effectively took over the Republican Party because there was not enough infighting. There was not enough people calling out the shit that was going on because they were too worried about possibly being seen as some kind of traitor to their political affiliation. Right, you can see how the lack of discourse and the blind unification on the right has completely sent it over the fucking edge, right? We've seen what happens when people unify with anybody on the same side of the political spectrum as them, regardless of what their beliefs are. Infighting is not an issue. It's your aversion to conflict. It's your inability to handle confrontation. It's your inability to allow anybody to have a differing belief as you. Something that's like super funny now to me too is all these leftists that didn't vote or voted third party or advocated for other people not to vote or spread rhetoric that encouraged other people not to vote. All of those people all of the sudden want there to be this very distinctive divide between intention and the material outcome. The same people that totally understand every other day of the year that your intentions don't matter if the action causes harm, right? These online leftists want you to see them as different than everybody else who made the exact same choice as them, right? They want you to view them as different than anybody else who didn't vote, right? That boomer 50-year-old that got interviewed outside of his supermarket who said, no, I just didn't vote this year. I didn't like either one of the candidates. And it's like, no, you're not different because you made the same exact choice. It doesn't really matter how you got there. It doesn't matter what your intentions were. The outcome was the same. The tangible action was the same. Right, and if it means they get to call somebody out and put themselves on a moral pedestal, they understand that intention does not matter. The outcome is actually what matters. The action is actually what matters. Like, they understand it, and they will understand it again in 2 days when they get to use that argument to degrade somebody else. But, just today, only today in the infinite. Every other day they understand that argument, but today they don't understand that argument. And even though they swayed votes away from Kamala Harris, they did so for a righteous reason, and therefore what they did was okay, and they're morally superior to everybody else. You're fucking not. Look at the people that made the same exact decision as you. That's the answer. It doesn't really matter what your intentions were. It matters what the tangible action was. And you shouldn't feel comfortable with the people you're surrounded by.
Oh,
This is fucking hilarious because there's no way that you're criticizing anybody while openly posting about the fact that you had to drag your boyfriend to the polls because you have to continue lecturing him and he just doesn't care. There's no way you openly posted like it was a cute fucking thing that you're dating a man who doesn't care that your rights are being stripped away and think you're in any place to criticize somebody else? Talk about aiding and abetting the fucking patriarchy. Grow a backbone. How about you turn around and have this conversation with your fucking boyfriend? Because you are clearly stating that you're dating a man who doesn't care that your rights are being stripped away. And you won't have that conversation, but you're giddy to come to TikTok and start fighting with people in the comment section that they're not far enough left, that they're not politically perfect enough for you. Yeah, when you can pull up your pants and have the conversation with your boyfriend, then you can start policing other people. Hold on. So you can come online and sit there and scream at people in comment sections and condescend to them because they aren't far enough left, but it's no big deal if your boyfriend isn't into politics. Right. You're just a misogynist, girl. And don't think I missed that you called women's rights female rights when referring to what's important to you. So you've got smoke for other women online who aren't far enough left for you while actively being transphobic and dating a man who isn't into politics. But to you, the man being into politics is no big deal. But women not being far enough left is enough for you to leave 35 comments in under 5 minutes. I should have realized the online left was fucking cooked after that whole customer service debate happened a few months ago. There were 3 major red flags that I think we should all pay attention to. First of all, it was how eager people were to start parroting right-wing conservative talking points and capitalist talking points, as long as they could masquerade them as a leftist talking point. The moment somebody started using the talking point, just do your job, it's in your job description, the conversation should have ended. The second thing was how quickly people tried to rewrite history. People tried to say that the entire argument was over whether or not a cashier should say hi, that the whole debate started because a cashier didn't say hi, and that's simply not true. The girl that made the first video was being fucking rude. The first story she told was about her going into a shop and getting a sandwich that she wanted to pick up one for her and her friend, and when she ordered a sandwich, she asked if it was 1 or 2 sandwiches that came with that, and they said, a sandwich? So she ordered 2, and when they made the sandwiches and brought them back over, she noticed they were cut in half, and she said, I thought you said I only got 1 sandwich. You cut, like, it's 2 sandwiches, and now I have 4 sandwiches. And they were like, no, it's 2 sandwiches that we cut in half. And she was mad because she thought it was actually 4 sandwiches. If a 50-year-old woman posted that in the Reddit thread, Am I the Asshole?, everybody would have harangued her for being the fucking Karen. Her second anecdote was about a cashier or customer service agent getting a little short with her in a store. Not after the first, second, or third question, but because she kept asking questions that she very easily could have just walked to the aisle to find. She made no effort and just kept asking question after question after question. Again, something before this debate everybody agreed made you the problem customer. So tell me why when discourse started around that situation, people started trying to say that actually this whole situation was just because a cashier didn't say hi, when that's patently fucking false. The third thing is applying a philosophy without any fucking context. Trying to bring community into a conversation that is strictly about laborers is fucking insane. Trying to say that somebody's labor is owed to you as a form of community is a fucking insane stance to take. It's also a hyper-capitalist stance to take. Something that I totally forgot about with everything going on is just how badly a problem Fed jacketing has been since last October. I think that's another thing that's just pissing me off about any leftist creator that's trying to talk about any form of unity on the left. As if they didn't spend a year Fed jacketing other people on the left that they just didn't like or deem to be far enough left. Like, it's very strange to me now how, like, so many leftists are concerned with infighting and unity over division and the left sticking together, when over the last year, it's been a moral dick measuring contest to see who is the furthest left. The moment that comparison started, unity went out the window. Now, after parading around also this rhetoric about how we need unity on the left, didn't we learn our lesson in 2016? They're making videos stitching people who campaigned for Kamala, calling them deep throaters. Genuinely, I don't understand how you behave like that, how you speak like that, and then think you have, like, any basis in community, or how you have, like, any basis in just fucking discussion. Like, there are leftists in my comments that are just like, you're a fucking lib. Okay, I look at you at this point the same way I look at MAGA freaks that comment the same exact thing. You have no fucking argument, so you're name calling. It's literally the same thing as when a Trump supporter goes, oh, you snowflake. They're worried about unity now because they realize they're about to be fucking ousted from the left due to their own behavior and rhetoric. They're realizing the people they have closest ties to is nobody on the left. It's the alt-right. And they're so fucking concerned, not about unity, but about being the center of the conversation, that a lot of them are going to team up with those MAGA freaks within a few years. And by the way, the reason they're all going so hard to defend themselves constantly for the decisions they made, for how they spoke about Kamala Harris and her campaign prior to the election, the reason they're all spiraling and defending their stances now is because they know they were wrong. I don't have to defend my stance for voting for Kamala Harris. You can tell me that you believe that my vote is the reason the Democratic Party will move further right, and I say you're entitled to that opinion. I think you're wrong. I wholeheartedly, fully, 10 toes down, know in my heart, in my brain, I made the right choice. I made the harm reduction choice. I made the right call for everybody I care about. So people saying things about voters and this and that doesn't bother me. The reason they're so upset that people are talking about the damage it did when they spoke the way they spoke, when they encouraged people not to vote, the reason they're so upset now about getting called out for that is because they know they were wrong. Because they know their argument isn't enough, which is why they stoop down to name calling and saying things like, you deep throater. My stance is enough. I don't need to call anybody a name. I know I made the right choice. They clearly know they didn't. This is what somebody has to say about tipping at a restaurant in America, where servers can legally make like $5 an hour and are expected to make their livelihood off of tipping. This is a great example of moral posturing so that you can actively demoralize somebody else. You're saying this to a service worker who told you tips are necessary for their servers to get by in life, to pay their bills. That is how they make their money. That is their main source of income. And instead of aligning with the server, you're doing backbends to find ways to defend customers who aren't tipping. And you're doing so by blaming the tipping culture and the tipping laws in America. The way we pay servers, the way we pay service workers is a fucking problem. That doesn't defend you going to a restaurant and then not leaving a tip, especially when you're aware of these practices. The big bad company doesn't negate the fact that you're also doing a big bad. P.S. If you're so hyper aware that the restaurants are these evil companies that are stealing from their workers, why the fuck are you actively patronizing them? Why are you defending anybody that actively patronizes them? Right, because you will find any way to speak down to service workers. Because it's not actually about any conversation that's going on. You're just giddy with excitement to demoralize somebody else. And by the way, these thought processes and how you blatantly put them out there like there's no problem is exactly why so many of us on the left are telling you that we can tell your Free Palestine stuff is just performative as fuck. Because there's no way you could be actively anti-colonialism while also actively helping uphold, perpetuate, and excuse capitalism and abusing laborers. It's actually just so disgusting
that people who spent this entire election season campaigning against Kamala Harris are now making money and making videos talking about the Trump administration, his new cabinet appointees, and how cooked we are. Hold on. So you see how bad it is, but you spent this entire election season not railing against Trump and who he openly said he was going to appoint to his cabinet, and instead shifted all your focus to railing against Kamala Harris and everything wrong with Kamala Harris and how she hasn't earned anyone's vote because she's not far enough left. At this point, we're not cooked because of Donald Trump. We're cooked because some of you have the self-awareness of a fucking wall. We're cooked because everybody who is telling you you have to vote Kamala Harris in to keep Trump out, or this is going to happen. He's already said he's going to put people like Elon Musk and RFK Jr. in his cabinet, right? We all told you that was going to happen. We all sat there and said, that's why you have to vote for Kamala Harris, even if you don't think she's left enough for you. And now you want to say we're cooked because he put them in office? He told us he was going to do that. We're cooked because you didn't fucking listen and you thought you were smarter than everybody else. And now we're here because you actively swayed votes away from Kamala Harris, because you campaigned against Kamala Harris and told people their vote isn't really that important and it's not any sort of tool to be used. I think this statement that So Informed made on her Instagram story pretty much encapsulates the lack of self-awareness and self-reflection with internet leftists. I think this just pretty much shows how a lot of leftists, while they might parade around the ideas of community, their politics are inherently rooted in individualism. Their politics are completely self-centric, right? It didn't matter that it was a harm reduction vote. It mattered that they didn't feel good about it. It doesn't matter to them that keeping Trump out of office was most people's main prerogative, because their lives are fucking in danger. People they love, their lives are fucking in danger now. It didn't matter what people needed. It mattered how they got to frame themselves in their mind. It didn't matter that a harm reduction vote is far more revolutionary than abstaining from voting. They abstained because that's what felt more revolutionary to them, right? And to say stop dividing people while inherently categorizing others as unprincipled for voting shows you the lack of self-awareness that these people have, and why they should not have the power that they do to influence others, because they're just dangerous. I'm pissed because no one is really talking about how the reason she didn't win was because she was a black woman. That's it. That's all. And I'm done with leftists and their refusal to confront it. This pretty much epitomizes the issue, at least that I've been seeing with a lot of online leftists and how they're talking about the election. The people that, by the way, keep saying you can't blame anybody except for the people who voted for Trump, and then get online and say, actually, it's the Democrats' fault because they're not far enough left. Jesus fuck, a thought does not exist in these people's head. This is a huge part of the problem, and you should be very wary of any leftist who is not at all willing to acknowledge the fact that race absolutely and gender absolutely played a part in Kamala Harris losing. Misogynoir is the reason Kamala Harris lost. And they're constantly jumping over that fact and ignoring it. Whether it's to make a different point or not, it doesn't really matter. They're ignoring and refusing to talk about the misogynoir that is going on in this country that lost Kamala Harris this election. The misogynoir that won Trump this election. And it's really annoying that these online leftists want everyone to acknowledge that, like, systems of white supremacy and patriarchy are rooted in America and are inherently a problem. I don't think these people even understand how a For You page or an algorithm work. I think they all thought that their anti-Kamala Harris, like, takes and their anti-voting stances were all going out to other leftists, and it wasn't. It was going out to anybody who was anti-Kamala Harris and or didn't want to vote. They think that it's okay that they played into that racism because that wasn't their intention. They think it's okay that racists who refused to vote for a black woman liked their content because that wasn't their intention. And it's like, no, it fucking matters who likes your content. It should tell you something about your content. Your content and who it appeals to is important. Not just who you want it to appeal to, who it's actually appealing to. Yeah, and it's because when they say Kamala Harris isn't progressive enough, it's only half the sentence. What they're actually saying is, Kamala Harris isn't progressive enough for a black woman. As long as the next politician is a white man proposing a $50,000 subsidy to all first-time homebuyers, that'll be considered a progressive policy all of the sudden. Right, as long as it's a white male politician that offers, blanket subsidies like that, yeah, he'll be seen as a communist icon, but Kamala Harris is borderline conservative for that policy. It's because when they say Kamala Harris isn't progressive enough, they're uncomfortable to say the second half of that thought, which is Kamala Harris isn't progressive enough for a black woman. I expect more from her because she's a black woman. If men want to put in the work themselves and have these conversations amongst themselves, they are more than welcome to do that. In fact, they are encouraged to do that. To say that people have to turn heel to center young men in order to prevent them from becoming white supremacists is beyond misogynistic, beyond racist. It's just asinine. I keep having to refilm this because it's so fucking insane that I have to explain to you how centering men and coddling men is not at all the fucking answer to preventing young men from going down these pipelines. You're saying not all men are inclined to go down those pipelines, therefore they could have their minds changed when shown a better way. Right, showing them the better way does not mean watering down the message and now centering it around them so it's more palatable for them. That's fucking insane, and that's so misogynistic. It's bewildering that men say this shit and don't hear it. If men want to have these conversations amongst themselves, that's their prerogative. To turn around and put the onus of the behavior of these young men who fall down alt-right and white supremacist pipelines, to put the behavior of those young men on anybody else is absolutely insane, and it is so devoid of understanding. It is literally stripping the responsibility away from the person who is actively causing harm and expecting every other person who's ever been affected by their behavior to turn around, hold their hand, say, I forgive you, let me show you the better way. No. This whole little comment you left is literally one of those tenets of white supremacy that we should be unpacking. This is you inherently rooting yourself in your comfort of privilege, saying that you're not comfortable grappling with the reality of things, therefore you would like things watered down and simplified, specifically for those who we believe will become oppressors. It is amazing the backbends that white men will do to find a way to recenter white men. In a system of white supremacy, all white people are racist until they actively do the work to deconstruct that racism. In America, racism is the passive action. Being anti-racist is the active action. In America, white people are groomed to abuse their race to uphold systems of white supremacy. In a system of white supremacy, white people are groomed to abuse their race and become foot soldiers of white supremacy. We are groomed to believe that our identity, that our worth is intrinsically linked to our race. That is the passive belief because it is taught to us due to the fact that we live in a system of white supremacy. Unless you are actively working against that, you are upholding the system of white supremacy. Under the patriarchy, all people are misogynist until they actively deconstruct
what they have been taught. Because under the patriarchy, we have those thoughts and beliefs ingrained to us in the way we are spoken to, in the ways we are taught, in the things that we are shown, in the ways that we are represented. So while I'm having a conversation specifically about young white men who are drawn to the white supremacy alt-right pipeline, you feel it's appropriate to say, this is assuming that men can't have their minds changed by being shown a better way. I want to be very clear. It's no one's job to show anybody the better way when the other option is white supremacy, fascism, the alt-right. It's nobody's job to coddle those oppressors out of being oppressors. If men want to have these conversations amongst themselves, they should, because that's their responsibility. To say that it is on any marginalized person to show one of their oppressors the better way is absolutely mind-blowingly apathetic. The second half of your sentence is, this is implying that misogyny and white supremacy is inherent to male brains when it isn't. It is. Actually, it is. If you're an American, those two things are actually inherent to you unless you've deconstructed them. That's what living in a system of white supremacy and living in a system of patriarchy means. No, you weren't born that way. You were groomed to be that way, just like every other American. And this language tells me that you just need to stop talking, start listening, and widening that following list. Because these talks about white supremacy and the system of white supremacy and how it's inherent to all of us, these are conversations that Black creators have been having for years on this app. The discussion of the system of white supremacy and how it is inherent to all of us as white Americans is literally a conversation and a lesson that has been explained on end and hammered home for the past few years by a litany of Black creators. So stop speaking and start listening, because it's also super weird that you left these comments on a video where I'm talking about my problem with Hassan Piker's misogyny and his misogynistic rhetoric and his insistence on decentering women and centering men.
It matters who you ally with. It matters who's standing next to you on your side. As I continue to criticize a lot of the rhetoric that anti-Kamala leftists were using, I continue to have an influx of leftists in my comments calling me a lib, saying I'm libbed up. Usually, by the way, for calling out racism that is prevalent within white leftist spaces. Can anybody else name a group of people that are so triggered by conversations about race, they immediately jump to calling people liberals, libs, snowflakes? It doesn't really matter what your motivations are, what your intent is, when the way you move, the way you speak is exactly the same as a MAGA. Like, I know these people identify as leftists, but I know in my heart of hearts that they would laugh the hardest at, like, libs of TikTok content. The reason a lot of you are being ousted from the left is because you're not actually on the left. You're alt-right and just also hate Trump. You're conservative in every way except the ones that directly affect you. You're anti-empathy for everybody except you. Your politics are completely self-centric and self-serving. They are completely individualistic, just like the alt-right. This is a conversation just for me and my fellow white women. Stop putting emotional labor onto Black women. Stop asking Black women to take time out of their day to educate you, and to educate you on something so fucking simple that they have been so fucking loud about. If you, at this point in time, are still trying to ask Black women what we as white women can do to signal that we are specifically the safe white woman in the room. That tells me that you haven't been listening. It tells me that your following list needs to be diversified. Specifically, you need to start following Black creators and you need to start following Black women because they talk about this stuff all of the time. Black women have taken the time to explain that you cannot make yourself stand out of a crowd as a safe white woman, and that inherently is making this entire thing about you and your feelings, as opposed to their safety, their feelings, their comfort. During the man versus bear conversation, Black women tried to deepen that conversation, to explain to white women how they felt. And they were punished for that, right? When it was man versus bear, white women understood overwhelmingly that it didn't matter that there are good men out there. You can't solely identify if a man is good by looking at him. Therefore, you would rather be approached by the bear. And then when Black women, like White Woman Whisperer, said, hey, that's how we feel about white women, they became targets of mass harassment campaigns where their accounts were demonetized and part of their income was stripped from them as a punishment for trying to have this exact conversation. And just know that if you were unwilling to engage in that conversation then, but are trying to actively start this conversation as a white woman now, that's misogynoir. You do not care about Black women and their safety or their feelings. You care about how you can make yourself look in the eyes of the world. You were not willing to have this conversation until you felt like it could benefit you. And that is a massive part of the problem here. If you could understand the bear versus man analogy, you understand how you, as a part of the oppressive group, cannot simply signal that you are a safe person. And you either understand that logic or you do not. But you do not get to pick and choose when you apply it, specifically based off of what makes you feel more comfortable. It's also incredibly important to note that you cannot deem yourself a safe person. You can want to be a safe person. You can strive to be a safe person. You cannot proclaim that you are a safe person. That is for other people to decide, right? And if you were unwilling to engage in the conversation of white woman versus bear, you are not a safe person, regardless of what you proclaim to be, because you are not willing to self-reflect, you are not self-aware, you are not willing to listen, you are not willing to place someone's safety over your discomfort, and your ideas of safety are completely self-centric. So, you want to actually be a safe person for Black women to be around? You gotta do the fucking work. It's not about talking the talk, it's about walking the walk. It's about having those uncomfortable conversations. It's about not being a bystander. It's about using your voice and using your privilege. And even when you do all of that, you do not get to deem yourself a safe person. That's simply the work you do to strive to be a safe person. Lastly, I will say, if you listened to me have a conversation with you about this, but you haven't engaged with any of the content that Black women have been putting out on this exact topic, you're not a safe person. You have a severe amount of misogynoir you need to unpack, and you need to be less self-centric and individualistic. Black women's safety is not about your comfort. Black women's safety is not a badge that you now get to wear. The reward of putting in the work to build community is the community.